Reactor online. Sensors online. Weapons online. All systems nominal.
Good morning, Mechwarriors and Fellow Gamers. Welcome back to Commander Hollow's Mech Bay. I'm Commander Hollow. Here we share fun, effective, and low-cost painting styles for Battletech miniatures and other games. Today we're going to talk about color schemes. So, if you caught the last episode, we did some prep work on this Quickdraw, who ultimately is going to be part of the Draconis Combine 1st Ghost Regiment. We've already got 2 other units here we've painted up in that style. And so that's ultimately what we're aiming for here. And that's good to know. So we started by applying a black primer. We then used some Craft Smart dark gray to apply a general gray base to it. And then this Folk Art Matte titanium white to apply some edge highlighting so that we could, as you can see, just gentle highlighting there to create definition. So now today we're going to be working with this D&D Prismatic Paint Ghost Gray. I really enjoy this stuff. I think I like the color. It's some of the first stuff that I bought when I got back into painting. So I've got kind of a fondness for it that way. And I will say it has a slightly different behavior compared to the Craft Smart. And I'm not sure if it's just a different chemical makeup, but it has... It comes out a little bit... you want to apply just a little bit of water to it because it's already a little thinner than the other stuff. It's just something to be aware of when we go through the prepping of the paint. Again, what we're trying to do is get a nice consistency so that the paint goes where we want it to and it doesn't run anywhere else. We're trying to preserve the different cracks in the unit, in the armor of the unit, to create that definition. So what we're going to be playing with is the way the light hits the unit and where it doesn't hit the unit. So we want to try to preserve the shadows as much as we can. And today we've got a different selection of brushes. I think last week we had the old mixing brush, which I was just using. Long, carries a good amount of water, and really lets you get in there and mix the paint around. And last time we used the fan brushes, which are large, for big formats. We won't be using those today. Those are some of the more expensive brushes I have. I think they're a couple bucks each, but most of the brushes I get come from packs that are, $5 to $10. Nothing too expensive. And even some of them, you can see on this one. Well, you can see on this one. I've used an X-Acto to cut some of the bristles off to make it a finer point, to allow me to get in and do some detail work when I want to. So today I think we're going to be working with this brush here. It's kind of a rounded tip. But we want to be able to carry a good amount of the paint to apply it. Again, we don't want to saturate the unit. So we're going to start, load it up a little bit, just a little bit, and then give it a little spin against the edge to knock some of the paint off. Let's save that for later. And then Let's see, we'll clean it off a little bit. Okay, let's see how it's behaving. Now, usually I'll start down here on the unit. And one of the ways I like to approach it, once I've selected what color I want to paint them in, is I like to think of the unit and paint along what would be armor for color, and then whatever is more of a wear point for the big stompy robot, I like to leave that more of an exposed metal. If you spend a lot of time around heavy machinery, you see that, they oftentimes will have covers for the actual bits that do the work. And those color covers may look very nice. They'll have whatever paint color the manufacturer gives it, and will retain that for a long time. But the wear points, the parts that rub against each other, or rub against the ground, or rub against trees, or depending on what it is the machine's doing, any paint you put on there is going to rub right off, and you'll have just the exposed metal. I think it adds a bit of realism to the unit. You see that on tanks too. I mean, there's lots and lots of examples online of military equipment, and you can see how units will look. I think that's a good source of inspiration. I know some people like to do the parade colors, and the units back here certainly are not really designed for to be seen or unseen. It's not really a camouflage to be running around in a bright red mech. It's more of a traditional color for the Draconis Combine. First sort of light. So when you're selecting your unit color scheme, oftentimes people will find inspiration in different places. For this color scheme, I'm working off of something I found on Camo Specs Online, which is, again, it's a great resource. It can really help you. You might see something you like and say, oh man, that's a good idea. I was thinking of something like that, but now that I see it, I know what to work towards. Others, and that's how I did it with the the Battlemaster there in the red. That was inspired by something I saw on Camo Specs, and oftentimes those are color schemes taken from the books themselves for Battletech. So they tend to be more official camo patterns. But you might have an idea for a mercenary unit or something where you're going to create your own scheme and give it, your own character. And I think that's a lot of fun. I did that with both of these guys back here, part of one of my mercenary groups. They have kind of a, synthwave or vaporwave feel to them. That's what I was going for. Coming out of the water on the basing. And you can paint them however you want. There's lots of examples of people doing all sorts of different things. They're your units. You're the one who's going to see them more than anybody else. So you should do something that you like. Other people are always going to have opinions. I will say that the Battletech community is one of the friendliest I've encountered. Just nice people. If you're friendly and you're looking to just play the game, and you got questions, they will help. Just really nice folks. Like with anything, you occasionally come across someone who's, a bit of an elitist or maybe taking things too seriously, but You know, you don't have to play with that person. As long as you like what you're doing, you enjoy what you're painting. So, now this example here, you know, because we're basically painting an off-white onto a gray and white undercoat, you know, you can kind of see things as they're developing. And we're going to be going back over this with our metallic gray. We'll talk about this in a bit. I really like that stuff. Just have to get the under chassis here. Here we go. And usually with that, you want to go a little bit lighter on it because it's underneath the unit. It's not going to get a lot of light. You know, there's times when, you know, maybe you just stepped on your mech just stepped on a car and the headlights are highlighting it, or you're doing a base that's lava, it's red hot and it's glowing, or maybe it's nuclear waste and it's glowing. You can get into different fun paint effects to create that illusion that there's light coming up from underneath. Takes a bit of skill, you know, a bit of practice, but it's absolutely doable, even with just a brush. Yeah, it's starting to look more and more like he's got a nice paint job. And again, this is an off-white that we're using, so it's not going to be as crisp as sort of well, you can even see just on the paper. You see, got the bright white of the printer paper. You got this kind of bluish, cool blue feeling of this this other color. And when you put it on the rest of the unit that has this you know, black primer with gray on it and white on it, just gives kind of a faded white look, like this thing was maybe crisp when it just came off the line, but it's had a bit of experience. It's a bit weathered. People have shot at it, and it has shot back. Okay, now we are back. We had a little family emergency. My daughter woke up, and my infant daughter, she wanted some food, so we're picking up where we left off, and we're still just blocking in color here for the Quickdraw. And let's see here. Now again, it's not, the important part is, and especially when you're working with lighter colors like this white, this off-white, or if you're working with yellow or orange, you might notice that the paint sometimes it's harder to get it done in just one pass, and that's okay. Sometimes it's better to do it in multiple coats. You'll get a more even look that way. And even if it's not fully coated, you can always go back and add a little more. It's easier to add a little more than it is to take it off. So, let's see, I'm taking out some of the excess from the brush. Just going on here. Now, another thing you might notice is I'm going, I'm trying to stay aware of the different joints on the mech. Some of these points that create definition, some of the different features. And when I'm brushing, I try to go against the grain. In fact, you can even see in here, this is a good example. Got a little bit of paint inside there. That's what we're trying to avoid. So if you got a junction, go to diagonal. You want to paint perpendicular to whatever joints it is you are adding color to. Well, not joints, but sections. You want to avoid those cracks between the panels. So let's see here. And with this, I'm anticipating I'm not going to paint this gun barrel here, right there. I'm going to be using a different color for that. So we're going to try to paint around. But at this point, if you get a little paint on it, that's okay. The metallic paint, at least the stuff that I like to use, it creates a really nice coat, and it will happily cover up most colors that you put on your units. It doesn't really take a lot of effort to do that. But just going gently over the unit, applying the color, and admittedly this can be some of the more time-intensive work, and you don't want to rush it. Just, take it easy. Enjoy the time, just slowly painting your unit. Watching as the definition comes out as you're adding color. And let's see here. Now, hands are kind of a stylistic choice. Some people like to paint the whole hand the same color as the unit. Some people like to do, just the back of the hand, like a little bit of like an armor panel on the back of the hand. And I think that's what we're going to do for this. Yeah, we're going to do a little armor panel here, and we'll make it look like you can see some of the knuckles, details on the knuckles, but we're going to make it look like those fingers. We're going to end up painting those black most likely. So I think that a lot of my units, if they do have hands, I'll paint it black. Sometimes I'll get out like a high gloss black and I'll paint the fingers that way, which I think picks up some of the definition in the fingers. And that's, it's probably a good time to talk about that gloss versus matte. When you're selecting your paint color, something, what you really want to think about is, how is the light going to react with it? And that comes down to, the shade you're using and whether it is a matte color or a high gloss finish. Or even some satin. I do have a few satin finishes. And it's really amazing the difference that it will make. The way the light will bounce off of it. the way certain things will be affected. And the reason it matters is sometimes with the high gloss, if you use too much of it, it'll just pick up so much light, and it can make darker colors appear lighter, and it can be harder to create the accents you want to create on the unit, because everything is shiny, you know. And I also, just as a personal style choice, military vehicles are not usually painted with gloss paint. You go to any museum, and you'll see most vehicles have a matte paint to not reflect light, because it makes them less noticeable. It's a really, I don't know if it counts as camouflage or not, but it's a consideration that they have, because usually you don't want the enemy to see you. Usually you want to be able to sneak up on them and not let them know they're there, that you're there, until it's time to let them know that you're there. So I use reflectives and high gloss very sparingly, and it's usually only to create accents. Like if we're doing the cockpit, I like to have a little bit of shine in that. Gun barrels, I like to have a bit of shine on that. I use it to emphasize, like, this is exposed metal, or this is exposed glass. To create that illusion for whoever it is that's, viewing the mech, viewing the miniature. And you might find you might have a different approach. If you're doing, I know some people like to do fantasy units with exposed armor. And if you have a nice contrast of really shiny silver armor compared to, right next to the skin of the unit, which, most people, unless they're very, very sweaty or oily or something, they won't have much of a shine to them. Most people, their skin's not very reflective. That contrast of the matte finish next to the shiny finish, the shiny high gloss finish, it really adds a sense of realism, because different materials reflect light differently. I don't know if we go back to the old physics in high school for a lot of us. I had the refractive index. We won't go into that. So just going through and hitting the edges here. Now, we're probably going to do some cleanup after this, or maybe even a second pass, depending on how this comes out. I'm not trying to get it 100% coated in white. We want this to, like I said before, we're going for more of a weathered look. So on this unit, these little bits here are rear lasers mounted in the rear. If you ever, when you're working with the minis, especially with Battletech, think ahead about your weapons and what you want to do. We're going to get into that later, but know, me, I tend to like to have exposed metal for the lasers, for the guns, for the missiles. Okay. Well, another family emergency. So, that's okay. That's okay. Good chance to rinse off the brushes. You know, you got to give the brushes a good rinse every so often. The paint will start to dry in the bristles. And in my experience, that's one of the leading causes to brushes getting ruined, is not rinsing often enough and letting the paint accumulate in the bristles. Let's see an example of that. This is one of the ones I first used when painting with this. With the Ghost Gray. Actually, and I dug up one of the units I painted when I first got back into model painting. And let's do a little side by side here. You can see, you know, I was enjoying it, but you can see there's a big difference here in the end results. And I think the camera's picking it up. I wasn't removing enough paint from the brush when painting this guy, and you can see it in the edges here. The paint just looks a little gloppy. It's not very smooth. It's not very even. I've gone back and tried to remove some of it or do some lining on it, and ultimately he's probably going to be taking a bath to remove the paint. A little bath and some rubbing alcohol. But I don't know. One of the first guys I painted up. You can also see I used a blue base for the it was a blue primer, because that's what I was able to find. And the cracks in it, in between the plates, they all had a bit of a blue tint. You can even see it poking out in some areas. So, it's, it plays, it's okay if that's what it comes out. That's okay. You can absolutely get that mini out there, and you can still have a good time with it. But, side by side, you can see the difference here in the detailing, and the smoothness of the paint, how even it's more evenly distributed. It doesn't look as gunked up. Just a little example. Okay. Now, let's get back. We're just about done. With painting up our guy here. And again, we are going to be going back over and putting some black paint on the hands. So if you get a little over, that's okay. The black paint will have no problem going over top of this, the Ghost Gray. Oof, I don't know if you can hear that. That was my stomach going. Highlight these little shoulder greebles. Yeah, make sure we get some of those. And we'll definitely be going back over that with some black paint for the lines. When you're doing this, you can start thinking about where you want to put, where are you going to put the metal? Where do you want the metal to be exposed? these little fins up here, we want these pretty evenly covered because they're, the top of the mech. They're going to see a lot of sunlight. They're not going to have a lot of shadows on them. But this helmet, or not helmet, the head has some nice detail